The radio crackled to life at 2:47 p.m. with the words every pilot dreads. Structure threat, immediate dispatch required. Marcus Rodriguez didn't even look up from his pre-flight checklist as he reached for the handset, his weathered fingers moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd answered similar calls for 15 years. But when dispatch continued with fast-moving grass fire, Maplewood Heights subdivision, winds gusting to 35, his head snapped up. Maplewood Heights, the kind of neighborhood where million-dollar homes sat on perfectly manicured lots, where homeowners associations had 17-page rulebooks about acceptable mailbox colors, and where residents called the fire department to complain about sirens being too loud during emergencies. Marcus had dropped water on fires threatening that area before, and it never went smoothly. Copy dispatch, Helicopter 47 responding, Marcus replied, already jogging toward his aircraft. The bright red CAL FIRE helicopter sat ready on the tarmac, its 2,000-gallon Bambi bucket coiled beneath like a sleeping snake. Through the smoke-hazed windshield of the operations building, he could see the angry orange glow on the horizon, growing larger by the minute. The fire had started in the dry grasslands east of town, probably another gender reveal party gone wrong or someone's illegal burn pile, though they'd figure out the cause later. Right now, the only thing that mattered was the wind pushing those flames directly toward a subdivision full of wooden decks, drought-stressed landscaping, and people who'd never lived through a real fire before. Marcus's crew chief, Danny Vasquez, was already running through the bucket system checks when the operations radio inside the building began blaring with an incoming call. Through the open hangar doors, Marcus could hear the fire chief's voice growing increasingly strained. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns, but we have an active structure threat situation." "I don't care about your situation." The woman's voice was shrill enough to carry across the tarmac. "I'm telling you right now that if one drop of that dirty water touches my property, I will sue this department, the city, and every pilot personally. Do you hear me? I know Mayor Davidson personally, and this is completely unacceptable." Marcus exchanged a look with Danny, who just shook his head and continued his checklist. They'd heard it all before, people complaining about water staining their cars, about the noise, about property damage from fire retardant. But this voice had that particular entitled edge that made Marcus's jaw clench. "Ma'am, please understand that we're trying to save your neighborhood." "My roses," the woman shrieked. "I've spent 12 years cultivating prize-winning heritage roses, and they're worth more than your little helicopter. If you damage them with your government overreach, I'll own this fire department." The fire chief's response was muffled, but Marcus could practically hear the man's blood pressure spiking through the radio static. He'd worked with Chief Morrison for 8 years, and the man was a saint when it came to dealing with difficult civilians, but everyone had their breaking point. Marcus climbed into the cockpit and began his startup sequence, the familiar whine of the turbine beginning to drown out the argument inside. The Maplewood Heights subdivision was 12 minutes away by air, and every second they delayed meant the fire grew larger, hungrier, more dangerous. He could see spot fires already dotting the hillside between the main blaze and the first row of houses. Chief Morrison to Helicopter 47, the radio crackled in his headset. "Go ahead, Chief." There was a long pause, filled with the sound of shouting in the background. "Marcus, we've got a situation here. Legal is advising a temporary hold on aerial operations pending resolution of property damage concerns." Marcus's hands froze over the collective. "Chief, you've got to be kidding me. That fire is moving at 15 acres per minute." "I know, son, I know. But I've got the city attorney breathing down my neck and some woman named Karen Whitman who claims she's got the mayor on speed dial. She's threatening lawsuits if we drop water anywhere near her property." Through his cockpit window, Marcus could see the smoke plume growing thicker, darker. At the base of that column, homes were about to start burning. The elementary school was less than half a mile from the current fire line. Sunset Manor, The retirement home, where his own grandmother had lived before she passed, sat directly in the projected path. Chief, with all due respect, that fire doesn't care about anyone's roses. Helicopter 47, you are to remain grounded pending further orders. That's direct from the city. I'm sorry, Marcus. The radio went silent except for the steady hiss of static. Marcus sat in his cockpit, engines spooled and ready, watching smoke rise into the afternoon sky, while somewhere behind him, a woman named Karen watered her flowers and threatened lawsuits. 6 minutes. He would give the politicians and the lawyers and the entitled homeowners exactly 6 minutes to come to their senses. After that, people were going to start dying, and Marcus Rodriguez had never let anyone die on his watch. Not in 15 years of flying, not in 23 years of fighting fires, and he sure as hell wasn't going to start today, because someone cared more about roses than human lives. The clock on his instrument panel read 2:53 p.m., 6 minutes and counting. Karen Whitman stood in her perfectly manicured backyard, designer garden hose in one hand and iPhone in the other, live streaming her victory to her 847 followers on Instagram. The smoke from the distant fire created what she considered a rather dramatic backdrop for her afternoon garden tour. So as you can see, ladies, I had to put a stop to this government overreach, she said to her phone's camera, panning across her prized heritage roses. They wanted to dump thousands of gallons of dirty water all over my award-winning garden. Can you imagine? These roses are worth more than most people's cars. Behind her, ash began falling like grey snow, dusting the pristine pool deck of her $2.3 million home. She brushed a fleck off her white linen shirt and continued her monologue, oblivious to her neighbor's sprinkler system activating automatically as embers drifted into their yard. 3 blocks away, Marcus watched the fire jump the first firebreak through his binoculars. The flames had found a stand of eucalyptus trees, nature's gasoline, and the fire's behavior changed instantly from threatening to catastrophic. Orange tongues licked at the sky, reaching heights that would make aerial drops more dangerous but infinitely more necessary. His radio erupted with chatter. Engine 12 to command. We've got spot fires starting in the Riverside Elementary parking lot, requesting immediate aerial support. Command to Engine 12, aerial operations remain suspended. Establish defensive positions and protect structures manually. Marcus watched Captain Rodriguez, no relation, despite the shared name, position his engine between the fire and the school. 26 years on the job, and Tony Rodriguez was being asked to fight a wind-driven grass fire with garden hoses because someone was worried about her flowers. The fire chief's voice cut through the radio traffic, strained and desperate. City Attorney, this is Chief Morrison. We need those aircraft in the air now. The fire has jumped containment, and we're looking at structure losses within the hour. The response was crisp, bureaucratic, and infuriating. Chief, Ms. Whitman has retained counsel and filed for an emergency injunction. Any aerial operations over her property constitute willful destruction of private assets. The mayor's office has confirmed this position. Through his headset, Marcus heard Danny swear in 3 languages. His crew chief had climbed down from a helicopter and was pacing the tarmac like a caged animal, watching the smoke column grow into a full-blown pyrocumulus cloud. That meant the fire was creating its own weather system, generating winds that would push it even faster toward populated areas. Back in her garden, Karen had moved on to her second live stream of the afternoon, this one aimed at her neighborhood Facebook group. I just want everyone to know that I've taken care of this helicopter situation, she announced proudly. They can't just spray chemicals and dirty water all over our beautiful community without consequences. Property values matter, people. The comments section began filling immediately, but not with the support she expected. Her neighbor, Janet Mills, whose house sat directly downwind from the fire, had posted a video of embers falling into her children's playground. Karen, are you insane? My kids are at that school. They're trying to protect. Karen dismissed the comment with a wave of her manicured hand. Janet's always been dramatic. The fire department is just trying to justify their bloated budget. How dangerous can a little grass fire really be? Her phone buzzed with a text from Mayor Davidson, or rather from his assistant, since the mayor himself had been avoiding her calls all afternoon. Karen, please reconsider your position. The fire department knows what they're doing. She typed back furiously. Richard, you promised me you'd handle the helicopter noise complaints. This is exactly what we discussed at the fundraiser. These people work for us, not the other way around. At the airfield, Marcus's 6-minute deadline had stretched to 12 minutes as he watched the impossible unfold. The fire had now consumed 200 acres and was bearing down on not just the elementary school, but Sunset Manor retirement home. 87 elderly residents, many of them mobility impaired, were being evacuated by a volunteer fire department that was already stretched beyond capacity. His radio crackled again. All units, we have a confirmed structure fire at 1247 Maple Drive. Repeat, we have our first structure loss. Marcus closed his eyes and made a decision that would either save lives or end his career. He reached for his radio and switched to the emergency frequency that bypassed normal dispatch protocols. Mayday, Mayday, this is Helicopter 47. I'm observing imminent threat to occupied structures and critical infrastructure. Requesting permission to engage under Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha. Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha was the nuclear option. It allowed fire personnel to override civilian authority when lives were in immediate danger. It also meant that if he was wrong, if the situation wasn't as dire as he believed, his career was over. The silence on the radio stretched for 30 seconds. It felt like 30 minutes. Finally, a voice he didn't recognize came through his headset. Helicopter 47, this is Battalion Chief Sarah Chen, Incident Commander. You are cleared for emergency aerial operations. Protect life and property. Legal consequences are hereby waived under state emergency statutes. Marcus had never heard of Battalion Chief Chen, but he didn't care. Someone with actual authority had finally put lives ahead of lawsuits. Copy, Incident Command. Helicopter 47 is airborne. As his rotors spun up to take off RPM, Marcus could see Karen in her backyard through his side window, still love-streaming, still watering her roses, still completely oblivious to the fact that her selfishness had just cost her neighbors 12 critical minutes in a fire that was now officially out of control. The clock on his panel read 3:05 p.m., time to make up for lost time, and maybe, just maybe, deliver a little lesson about priorities along the way. Marcus lifted off at 3:06 p.m., his helicopter rising through a column of superheated air that made the aircraft buck and shudder like an angry bull. Below him, the Maplewood Heights subdivision looked like a chessboard where half the pieces were already on fire. The wind had shifted, pushing the flames in a deadly arc that would trap the elementary school and retirement home in a pincer movement within the hour. Through his headset, he could hear the chaos unfolding on the ground. Engine 19 to command, we've lost water pressure on Maple Drive. The fire took out the main line. Medic 7 to command, we have multiple heat exhaustion cases at the school evacuation site. Request additional ambulances. Ladder 3 to command, Sunset Manor is requesting immediate assistance. They can't get 2 residents out of the building. Mobility issues. Marcus's jaw clenched as he approached his first drop zone. Every one of these emergencies could have been prevented if he'd been in the air 20 minutes ago. Instead, he'd been grounded because a woman cared more about her landscaping than her neighbors' lives. He activated his water-dropping system and began his approach to the elementary school, where spot fires were now burning in the playground mulch and threatening the building's wooden eaves. The Bambi bucket deployed beneath his aircraft, a 2,000-gallon tow drop of salvation that would either save the school or arrive too late to matter. On the ground, Captain Tony Rodriguez positioned his engine crew behind their truck as Marcus's helicopter thundered overhead. The water drop was perfect, surgical precision that doused the spot fires without damaging anything more fragile than Karen's delicate sensibilities. But as Marcus banged for his second approach, his radio exploded with a familiar voice. "This is Karen Whitman calling the fire department. I can see that helicopter flying directly over my property in violation of the court order. I'm recording everything, and my attorney will be filing charges." Marcus nearly laughed. The woman was actually calling in complaints while her neighborhood burned around her. He keyed his radio to respond, but Battalion Chief Chen beat him to it. "Ma'am, this is Incident Command. We are operating under emergency protocols. Please evacuate your area immediately." "I will not evacuate. This is my home, and I have rights. That pilot is going to pay for every drop of water that lands on my property." Through his cockpit window, Marcus could actually see her, a tiny figure in white standing defiantly in her backyard, phone pressed to her ear, garden hose still running. Her neighbors' houses were being pelted with embers, their cars were covered in ash, and evacuation vehicles were streaming past her driveway. But Karen Whitman was taking a stand for her constitutional right to prioritize roses over human lives. Marcus made his second drop on a cluster of houses where the fire had started crowning, jumping from ground level into the tree canopy, where it would become impossible to stop. The water hit with the sound of thunder, steam rising in billowing clouds as 2,000 gallons of lake water met 1,200-degree flames. Helicopter 47, this is Engine 23. Outstanding drop. You just saved 6 houses on Sycamore Street. But as Marcus circled back toward the lake to refill his bucket, he heard the call that made his blood run cold. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Ladder 3. We have crews trapped in Sunset Manor. The fire jumped the parking lot, and we can't get a ladder truck positioned. We need immediate aerial support on the north side of the building." Marcus looked toward the retirement home and saw what Ladder 3 was facing. The fire had moved faster than anyone predicted, cutting off the main access road and trapping the fire truck in a dead-end parking lot. Through the smoke, he could see the ladder extended to a third-floor window, where 2 firefighters were helping an elderly woman onto the platform. "Command, this is Helicopter 47. I can knock down the fire around Ladder 3, but I need a clear approach from the north." "Negative, Helicopter 47. That approach takes you directly over the Whitman property. Legal advises." "Command, we have firefighters about to be overrun." Marcus's voice cut through the bureaucratic doublespeak like a chainsaw. "I don't care about anyone's legal advice." The radio fell silent for 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. Marcus could see the fire moving toward the trapped ladder truck like a living thing, hungry and relentless. In that moment, he realized he was facing the same choice every firefighter eventually confronted: follow orders or save lives. There was no choice at all. "Command, Helicopter 47 is making emergency approach to Sunset Manor. If anyone has a problem with that, they can arrest me after I get those firefighters out." Marcus banked hard toward the retirement home, his flight path taking him directly over Karen Whitman's perfectly manicured backyard. As he approached, he could see her waving frantically at him, pointing to her roses, her mouth moving in what he assumed were threats and curses he couldn't hear over his rotor noise. The water drop would need to be perfect. Too short, and the fire would continue advancing toward the trapped truck. Too long, and he flooded the retirement home's parking lot where ambulances were still evacuating residents. The margin for error was measured in feet, not yards. Marcus lined up his approach, the retirement home growing larger in his windscreen. Below him, Karen Whitman stood in her garden like a tiny, furious scarecrow, still gesturing at his aircraft as if her indignation could bring down a helicopter. The fire was 50 yards from the ladder truck and closing fast. 40 yards. 30. Marcus released his load. 2,000 gallons of lake water fell toward the earth in a precisely calculated arc, aimed at the narrow strip of burning grass between the fire and the firefighters. But as the water fell, a gust of wind caught the edge of the drop, spreading it wider than Marcus had intended. The main volume of water hit its target perfectly, knocking down the fire and creating a safe corridor for the ladder truck. But the wind carried spray, about 200 gallons worth, drifted eastward and fell like a biblical flood directly onto Karen Whitman's prize-winning heritage roses. And onto Karen herself, who was still standing in her garden, phone in hand, live-streaming her outrage to the world. Marcus watched in his side mirror as Karen disappeared beneath the deluge, her white linen outfit instantly soaked, her perfectly styled hair flattened to a skull, her phone undoubtedly ruined. The woman who had prioritized her flowers over her neighbor's lies had just received the universe's opinion on her priorities. His radio crackled with laughter from Ladder 3. Helicopter 47, that was the most beautiful water drop I've ever seen. You just save our lives. Marcus keyed his microphone, trying to keep the satisfaction out of his voice. Just doing my job, Ladder 3. Sometimes the wind has a sense of justice. Karen Whitman's live stream had been going perfectly until 3:23 p.m., when 200 gallons of lake water traveling at 40 miles per hour turned her from an indignant homeowner into a soggy internet sensation. The impact knocked her backward into her prized rose bushes, thorns tearing at her designer clothes as she flailed in the muddy soup that had been her perfect lawn moments before. Her phone, miraculously, had survived the deluge, waterproof cases being one of the few practical purchases she'd ever made. As she struggled to her feet, dripping and furious, she realized that her live stream was still running. And judging by the notification sounds coming from her phone, it was being shared far beyond her usual 847 followers. This is assault, she sputtered into the camera, mascara streaming down her cheeks like black tears. That pilot deliberately targeted me. I want him arrested. I want him fired. I want him. The comments section was exploding faster than she could read them, but the ones she caught weren't offering the sympathy she expected. Koen Gotiomand by AHELICOPT. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Imagine caring more about flowers than people's lives. Someone needs to give that pilot a medal. Her neighbor Janet Mills had apparently joined the live stream and was providing real-time commentary. For everyone just joining, this is the woman who stopped the fire department from putting out the fire that's been threatening our kids' school for the past hour. Calm as a helicopter, Karen. Meanwhile, Marcus was already refilling his bucket at the lake, but his radio was buzzing with chatter that had nothing to do with fire suppression. Apparently, Karen's soaking had been witnessed by more than just her live stream audience. Helicopter 47, this is News Channel 7. We caught your water drop on our traffic camera. Outstanding work out there. Marcus, this is Chief Morrison. I don't know whether to discipline you or nominate you for a commendation. That woman is threatening to sue everyone from you to the governor. Hey, water drop pilot, came an unfamiliar voice on the emergency frequency. This is Detective Sarah Kim, off duty, but I'm evacuating my kids from Riverside Elementary. Whatever you did to shut up that crazy lady, half the neighborhood saw it, and we're all buying you drinks when this is over. As Marcus made his approach for another critical drop, this time targeting the fire that was threatening to jump Highway 12 and spread into the national forest, he could see the full scope of what Karen's interference had cost. The elementary school's playground was charred but intact. 2 houses on Maple Drive were total losses that could have been saved. The retirement home was safe, but only because firefighters had risked their lives to compensate for the delay. Back in her ruined garden, Karen was discovering that her live stream had gone viral in all the wrong ways. The video of her getting drenched had been screen recorded and was now circulating on TikTok, Twitter, and Reddit with increasingly creative captions. When you call the manager, but the manager calls a helicopter. POV, you value roses over human lives. Breaking, local Karen discovers gravity. But the social media humiliation was nothing compared to what happened when Karen tried to follow through on her threats. Her first call was to Mayor Davidson, who finally answered his phone personally. Richard, that pilot assaulted me. I'm standing in my garden soaked to the bone, and my roses are destroyed. You need tow. Karen, the mayor's voice was ice cold. I've been watching the news coverage. Do you have any idea what you've done? I protected my property rights. That's what you said you'd support when I donated to your campaign. 2 houses burned down because of your injunction, Karen. 2 families lost everything because you were worried about your garden. The state fire marshal is already asking questions about political interference with emergency operations. The line went quiet except for the sound of sirens in the background. When Mayor Davidson spoke again, his political career was audibly distancing itself from hers. 6 months later, Marcus Rodriguez stood in the same hangar where Karen Whitman's voice had once echoed with threats and demands. This time, the space was filled with the cheerful chaos of a community celebration. Banners reading "Hero Pilot" and "Thank You Helicopter 47" hung from the rafters, and the entire Maplewood Heights neighborhood, minus one conspicuous absence, had turned out to honor the man who saved their community. The incident review board had taken exactly 47 minutes to clear Marcus of any wrongdoing. The state fire marshal's investigation had been even more conclusive, recommending new protocols to prevent civilian interference with emergency operations. Marcus had received the California Fire Service Medal of Valor, presented by Governor Martinez herself, who used the ceremony to announce new legislation protecting first responders from frivolous lawsuits during emergencies. The Karen Whitman Act, as it was unofficially known, made it a felony to interfere with fire suppression activities for personal property concerns. The official name was the Emergency Response Protection Act, but everyone knew its origin story. Karen herself had become the internet's favorite cautionary tale. The video of her getting drenched had accumulated over 30 million views across all platforms, spawning countless remixes, reaction videos, and memes. Late-night talk show hosts had turned her into a punchline that never seemed to get old. Karen vs. Helicopter merchandise was still selling briskly, with proceeds going to wildfire prevention charities. The legal consequences had been swift and severe. The families whose homes burned during the delay had filed a class action lawsuit against Karen for damages totaling $3.2 million. Her homeowner's insurance had dropped her after discovering she caused the very emergency she was claiming against. The city had filed its own suit for the cost of the extended fire response, and the state was pursuing criminal charges for public endangerment. Karen's house, the one she'd been so desperate to protect, now sat empty behind a for sale sign that had been up for 4 months with no takers. Even in California's hot real estate market, nobody wanted to buy the helicopter lady's house. The heritage roses she'd valued so highly had died within weeks, casualties of the flood damage and her subsequent neglect as legal bills consumed her attention and resources. She'd been sentenced to 500 hours of community service with the local fire department, specifically maintaining the equipment that she'd prevented from being used. Every Saturday for the next 2 years, Karen would be washing fire trucks, organizing hoses, and learning firsthand about the work she'd so casually dismissed. The judge had called it poetic justice. The internet had called it absolutely perfect. Mayor Davidson had lost his re-election bid by the largest margin in city history, his campaign fatally damaged by his association with Karen's influence peddling. His replacement, a former fire captain named Maria Santos, had run on a platform of public safety first and won in a landslide. At the celebration, Marcus was surrounded by the people whose lives his decision had saved. Janet Mills approached with her 2 children, both wearing miniature fire helmets. "Mr. Marcus," 7-year-old Emma Mills said, "My mommy says you're the reason our school didn't burn down." "Your mommy's right," Marcus replied, kneeling to her level. "But you know what? The real heroes are all the firefighters who work together to keep people safe. Even the mean lady who got wet." Marcus chuckled. "Even her. That's what we do. We protect everyone, even when they don't make it easy." Tony Rodriguez, the engine captain who'd been trapped at the retirement home, approached with a grin and a beer. Still can't believe you managed to save us and give that woman a bath at the same time. Best flying I've ever seen." "I keep telling everyone, that was the wind," Marcus protested, though his smile suggested he wasn't entirely disappointed by the wind's choice of timing. Chief Morrison took the microphone to address the crowd. "6 months ago, we faced a crisis that tested everything we believe in about duty, service, and doing what's right. Marcus Rodriguez showed us that sometimes being a hero means making the hard choice, even when it might cost you everything." The crowd erupted in applause, but Chief Morrison wasn't finished. "Today, I'm proud to announce that Marcus has been promoted to lead pilot for our aerial firefighting division. He'll be training the next generation of pilots who, God willing, will never face the choice between following orders and saving lives." As the celebration continued around him, Marcus stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The California sky was clear and blue, no smoke columns on the horizon, no emergency calls crackling through his radio. Through the hangar doors, he could hear laughter and conversation, the sound of a community that had come together in the aftermath of crisis. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter in college. "Dad, my friends all think you're famous now. Mom sent me the video of the helicopter lady getting soaked. I've watched it like 100 times. So proud of you for doing the right thing. Love you." Marcus smiled and pocketed his phone. Fame wasn't what he'd been after that day. He'd simply been a pilot doing his job, making the only choice his conscience would allow. The fact that justice had fallen from the sky, literally, was just the universe's way of keeping score. Behind him, the celebration was winding down, but the story would live on. Every new firefighter would hear about the day a pilot chose lives over lawsuits. Every social media user would remember the woman who learned that actions have consequences. And every emergency responder would know that sometimes doing the right thing means ignoring the wrong orders. Marcus Rodriguez had gone up in a helicopter to fight a fire. He'd come down as a symbol of what happens when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. And somewhere in a small apartment across town, Karen Whitman was getting ready for another Saturday of washing the very fire trucks she'd once tried to ground, learning day by day that the real world has no patience for people who put their gardens ahead of their neighbors' lives. The scales of justice, it turned out, could be balanced with lake water and consequences. And sometimes, that was exactly the lesson the world needed to learn. Marcus walked back into the hangar, where his community was waiting to celebrate a hero who'd never asked to be one, but had earned the title the moment he chose to put lives before lawsuits and safety before selfishness. The helicopter that had delivered justice from above sat quietly in the corner, ready for the next call, the next crisis, the next moment when someone would have to choose between doing what's easy and doing what's right. Marcus Rodriguez had made that choice once. He'd make it again without hesitation, because that's what heroes do. They show up when it matters, even when the sky is falling, and the only thing standing between disaster and safety is one person willing to do their job, even if it means getting a few roses wet in the process.